So we'd like to thank everyone for joining today's Colaverse summer discussion on social media in the time of pandemic and protests, which is being presented by Dr. Crystal Walker, who has over 15 years of experience helping clients engage people, apply processes, and implement technology to improve human and organizational performance. She is the founder and principal consultant of the 3C's training group, where she serves clients in leadership and talent development. Dr. Walker earned an undergraduate degree in human services, a graduate degree in management and organizational leadership, and she has a doctorate of management and organizational leadership. She is also a certified professional in training management and prides herself on developing the next generation of management leaders. She is also certified in analyzing both Caliber Essentials and PDP Global Assessment data, which allows her to provide expert coaching and strategy in building talent from selection through succession. So I would like to turn the floor over to Dr. Crystal Walker.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I am super excited to be here today. If you guys can hear me okay, you see the screen and everything okay, please give me a thumbs up just so I can see. All right, so first of all, let me just say thank you so much for this invitation. I love Woodbury University. I was an adjunct faculty there for about 7 years and had the pleasure of working within the Writing Center alongside Dr. Ellis and Laurel, and met some very cool, interesting colleagues that we're still in touch today. And so anytime there's an opportunity to come back and speak or engage with the Woodbury family on any level, I'm excited about that. I do have a PowerPoint presentation today that I'd like to share. And so let me take a moment just to share my screen. And we can use that as we navigate this presentation today. Here we go. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about social media and the role that it plays in protests, the role that it plays in just about all of our lives. And I remember being at Woodbury, and I remember we were having very early discussions about multimedia and how the role that it plays in writing. And since then, you know, we've seen such an evolution in social media and how it's used in a variety of ways. And so I want to spend just a moment kind of I'm not going to spend too much time on an introduction here, but here's my background. If you like to learn a little bit more about me, I actually have a full-on website and all of my experience here. I've written quite a few articles for the training industry. I'm now one of their master facilitators for their master courses and their certification. And so I'm super excited to have that level of partnership and for the platform to be able to share my expertise, not just in leadership development and learning development, but also around issues like diversity and inclusion and microaggressions and unconscious bias and things of that nature. Our agenda today, and if you don't mind, I'm actually going to move through these few slides a little quickly because I want to make sure that we have enough time for discussion. But our agenda today is going to be quite simple. In honor of those who have lost their lives to recent and historical deaths associated with racial injustice, I kind of want to take a moment of silence. We'll do that, about 30 seconds of silence, just to kind of reflect on our history, where we've been and where we are today, and hopefully where we're going. And then I want to share a couple minutes of a few uncomfortable truths that has really positioned us as a global society to think about where we are, where we're going, and what are some of the challenges that are ahead of us. And then the role that social media actually plays in that. And then we'll transition into questions and conversations. There's 3 questions that I want to have or that I want to use to facilitate discussion here. And I've timed each question to run for about 10 minutes so that we have more than enough time to at least scratch the surface for some of this discussion. So I'll go ahead and move on without any further ado. Let's take a moment And let's just take a quick moment of silence as we reflect on the recent deaths, the historical deaths that have happened as a result of racial injustice. So thank you guys for participating in that. I know sometimes we're so busy moving and just kind of carrying out with our day-to-day that we don't spend enough time in reflection, especially about topics that can be rather controversial. And so I felt it was only necessary that we at least spend some time just reflecting on what's brought us to this current state and how can we really navigate this new space in the midst of a pandemic. So I want to share just a brief, or just kind of facilitated a brief discussion on some uncomfortable truths. And I want to start out with these images that you see here on the screen. This is an image of Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered while jogging. We know Mr. George Floyd, who was murdered in broad daylight by the officer who had his knee on his neck. And then Miss Breonna Taylor, who was actually murdered in her own home. All three of these murders were unwarranted and has really attributed to a global outcry of how we think about racial injustice. And even though these are three of the most recent events, and unfortunately there's been news around other events, murders that have taken place even after these more recent events, but there's a long line over the last few years of African Americans killed at the hands of police officers. And so I wanted to kind of use that as our framework. And I know you were probably wondering, why is she spending so much time or providing these resources around racism for a discussion around social media? I wanted to create just a foundation, or create some context for where we're going to go with our discussion. So I've shared a couple of resources with you some time out just to kind of get an understanding of what the climate is right now. What are people fussing about? What are they arguing about? What are they debating about? What's the controversy around? Because you have very mixed opinions about a lot of what's happening today. But in this reading list, there was a specific article that drew my attention, and it's called How Organizations Can Support the Mental Health of Black Employees. And as a Black employee, I'm always interested in not just the surface level discussion of what employers want to do in terms of brand preservation. So I think we all saw within the last couple of weeks, especially following the death of George Floyd, all of these organizations putting out communication on their stance. But there's a lot of work that has to be done to really allow those messages to penetrate within their organizations. And so it's important that even as we think about, just from an organizational standpoint and also from an academic standpoint, where a lot of this stuff is stemming from and what our approach is and what our role is in being part of the solution and not the problem. So the article was really interesting to me because there were a couple of quotes, and I have them listed here on the screen. Just recently after the George Floyd murder, you saw a spike and an increase in job postings for diversity and inclusion managers and directors and chiefs and head of this particular role. Well, the challenge even in that aspect is that until recently, there's not even been enough resources or even funding to have that level of expertise within an organization. And so a lot of those individuals now, including myself, who are being sought after to share their perspective around D&I issues, have started out in affinity groups, have been a part of organizational focus sessions, or, community initiatives where we've gotten our own understanding. But I thought this was pretty interesting. This quote here that you see, when Black Americans watched the video of George Floyd being killed by a white police officer, we saw ourselves. In those 8 minutes and 46 seconds, we were horrified, enraged, and anguished as a man who could have been our spouse, our brother, our son, our nephew, our cousin, or us was killed. Collectively, Black Americans were traumatized. And I want to sort of unpack that word traumatized as it relates to our discussion today. It's really another quote from the article. It's an experience that is a result of severe psychological distress following any terrible or life-threatening incident. And so when you think about the murder of George Floyd, along with the others who've been murdered in broad daylight, whether we choose to take a side on whether it was fair, warranted, or whatever, it's created a noise, I think, and within this era that really can't be silenced. When we think about how racial trauma shows up, it typically shows up in three forms. There's systematic racism, which we see in a lot of organizations, in a lot of industries. So from the financial industry, the real estate industry, different organizations, and how they actually have their systems set up in place that prevent minorities from being able to advance within their institutions. So you see it in that form. You also see systematic racism play a big role in the penitentiary systems. But then there's interpersonal racism that we experience that really stems from bigotry, our own personal biases and prejudice, and microaggressions that we've experienced or that we've carried on from generation to generation. And then there's the final form that it shows up in, and that's internal racism based on these stereotypes that we've actually bought into, and now they're a part of how we make decisions and how we filter information. And so having this information as a context for our discussion today, I also want to just share this real quick before we move over into the role of social media. I've been sitting on panels. I've actually sat on a panel here at Rosemary University in Henderson, Nevada, which is where I currently work. And some of the responses that we received from the students once our president released the announcement on where we stand as it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement, the students wanted to see some action. And they wanted to see some action as it relates to bias even in the healthcare systems. And what can we do as a university to offset and to educate our faculty, our students, so that they do understand that minorities in the healthcare system have very real challenges and very real issues. But that was one instance. I also had the pleasure of sitting on a panel with the training industry, and we had a lot of discussion around learning and development or diversity and inclusion in the training space. And I've been having people reach out to me from various platforms and industries, and I've come to the conclusion based on just my own research that I've been dealing with really 4 groups. And the first group is the traumatized Black or African Americans who come to work every day silent, battling these microaggressions and battling these experiences that they just don't want to talk about. It's almost like opening up Pandora's box or asking someone to be naked and then trying to determine what you're going to do about their nakedness. So these individuals just choose to remain silent. And then there's the empathetic white Americans who are not racist. They want to be a part of the solution, but they can't really relate to any of the experiences of African Americans. So they want to be a part of the solution. They're apologetic. They're very empathetic. They want to be able to relate to some of the experiences we've had. And then there's individuals from other minority groups who are just kind of looking to see how this all plays out. So if we see some justice in this area, maybe that'll give us permission to raise our hands in other areas for some of our challenges that we've had. But then there's this silent population, or this population that kind of wishes all of this will go away. And so as you're thinking about the people who you interact with, even on social media, and these are just the 4 categories of people that I have had the pleasure of working with. Even people who have a completely different perspective than I have, I'm always open to conversations. I'm always open to understanding their perspective because I really want to know what's behind their thinking. So as we transition to, and I'm going to ask if you can please mute your lines in the background. This session is recording and we seem to be picking up someone's background noise. But the role of social media and how we navigate this experience right now with using our platforms to be boisterous about our political reviews, our political perspectives, our personal perspectives, it's really important. And we've never had a resource like this before when it comes to talking about racial injustice. I want to invite you to consider this though. If you think about the role that social media plays in the world of pandemic, in the world of protest, it really kind of starts with the hashtag. Well, what do you mean by that, Crystal? We now have the power to hashtag anything that we want to become a trend. We now have the power to search for certain hashtags. If we're looking to brand ourselves in one area or another, we can create a hashtag and attach it to all of our posts, all of our images. And now we've created a trail for people to be able to find us, to engage with us, to comment on our perspectives, even if they happen to disagree with them. So when I think about the hashtags that have been created around this more recent event, you have the Black Lives Matter hashtag, you have the All Lives Matter hashtag, and you have the Blue Lives Matter hashtag. Well, these are just examples that relate to this specific event. But I remember when, I'll give you another plain example. I remember when President Trump was selected as president or nominated as president, and people were hashtagging "not my president." You can follow that trail very easily to find out who those individuals were, right? I remember when, I forget the two sisters' name, Chloe, and I forget the other African-American sister, they're new R&B artists, but I remember one of them had won a role for the Little Mermaid, and people were hashtagging "not my mermaid," right? Here's the interesting thing about these hashtags. They can be followed. And we have access now to find very specific information on people. So when you start to hashtag racist comments or things that are pretty controversial, you can actually find out where a person works, what school they attend, all of that very personal information that we have not had available to us. A couple weeks, it's been probably about 3 weeks ago now, I posted this image on social media. And I have a pretty introverted personality. I don't really care to be the center of attention or have a lot of attention, but I do use my platforms appropriately and try to exercise EQ whenever I can and whenever I'm on these platforms. And for a long time, I remained silent about my perspective as it related to the George Floyd killing. I have a lot of very diverse colleagues, and I wanted to really get an understanding of what's going on. How are you feeling as it relates to all of this? But I finally got enough courage to post this image on LinkedIn, and it's an image of my 2 Black sons. And I chose to use my these words. I was very careful about my word choice, but I chose to use "these are my Black sons" intentionally. And I shared their recent accomplishments as college graduates and pursuing higher education. And then I kind of finished it off with "their lives absolutely matter to me and others." Well, if you followed the chain, there's commentary around, well, why do you have to mention that they were Black? Well, because of the stereotypes that are associated with Black men. I wanted people to know that not all Black men have these negative stereotypes around them. Anyway, it got up to about almost 60,000 views. There's a lot of comments on there. If you want to follow that thread, then you absolutely can. But what I discovered in this was the power in social media. So people started tagging in, people started providing their perspective and so on and so forth. But it also made me think about some of the other things that are happening in social media around this. So for example, apps like TikTok, Instagram, where people have an opportunity to share their opinions, videos, footage, YouTube, and all of that, it's really changing the dynamic. And so while we have this freedom of speech, what we're starting to see now is a bunch of consequences that are happening as a result of social media. So this particular example, and there's tons of examples out here, but this particular example, this was a high school student who posted something racist on TikTok, and it just went viral immediately. And so this is one example of high school students who are just kind of speaking about things from a very premature perspective, and it's causing major consequences on their future. I've seen quite a few posts where people are losing out on college opportunities, scholarships. Here's another example where this was 3 North Carolina officers were fired as a result of using their social media platforms to make racist comments. So again, here we see another consequential perspective of how social media can be used against you, if you will. And then this is the final one. This was a nurse based out of Indiana who kind of really went on a rant, and I have her YouTube post there if you want to go and see it for yourself. But she just kind of went on a rant, and from her perspective, racism doesn't exist. And so when you think about how people are using their social media platforms to either be part of the problem or part of the solution, and I think that's all subjective based on who you talk to, it plays a huge role in moving forward and coming to some form of consensus where we start to really see some positive movement towards racial justice. So from that point on now, and this is perfect time, and I actually want to transition over into the questions that we have and open it up to those of you guys who'd like to join in on this conversation. So we have 3 questions, and on the slides is a 10-minute timer. So I want to make sure that we're mindful of the time as we navigate this part of the discussion today. At the 9:30 mark, I'm just going to pop in and remind whoever is speaking that you have 30 seconds to please wrap up your conversation. And then we're going to move on to the next question. Okay, so here we go. First question is, have you ever been a target of racial injustice, bias, or microaggression? And if so, keep your emphasis on briefly.
Well, my experience. Want to hear me?
Okay. Yes.
So, real brief, I grew up in a very diverse community, went to private school all the way up until my senior year. Things that I've experienced, believe it or not, I didn't realize that it was racially motivated until I became an adult. As an adult, I started hanging around with a lot more people from where I come from, a lot more Black people, and I would hear things, but I would say growing up, it was never really something talked about in my home. My mom didn't teach us about racial injustice or people are going to treat you a certain way because of your color. I didn't know about that, and because I grew up in a very diverse community, I didn't realize that a lot of the things that I experienced was racially biased. One of the things that I just realized recently during this whole thing going on, a friend of mine posted on social media, on Facebook, how many of you have ever been pulled over at gunpoint? I've been pulled over at gunpoint many a times. And when I talk to some of my colleagues that are not Black or some of my friends that are not Black, they were in total awe that this is something that happens regularly to Black people. I'm a Black woman. I'm not driving, I'm not crazy approached by the police, but the times that I have been pulled over, it hasn't been every time, but a lot of the times that I've been pulled over at gunpoint. So it was really shocking to me that was not normal. Believe it or not, because it's happened so many times to my friends, I thought that was just standard. I thought it was standard protocol, but come to find out after talking to so many of my friends who are not Black or even not Latino, they told me they've never been pulled over at gunpoint. So that was a big shock to me. And it just led me to know that it's a lot of things that happen in the Black community or to Black people that we think is normal because it happens all the time. But in reality, it's not normal and it's not something happening to all races. So that was my little spiel.
Thank you, Michelle. Anybody else want to chime in and share their experience if they've had one?
Hey, Crystal?
Yes.
Hi, good to see you. It's Eric.
Hey, Eric, how you doing?
Hey, good. So I identify with this question on the bias side and microaggression. Obviously, I'm not Black. but I want to share a story that goes back. I grew up in Brooklyn, multicultural, multi-ethnic place where, you know, everybody was treated equally. We were all children of immigrants. My fifth, Allentown, Pennsylvania. I was in a junior high school, and I remember my teacher. When I walked in, my teacher said, she looked at my last name and she looked at me and she said, "Okay, you need to sit at the back of the classroom." I queried her why, and she said, "Well, don't you know all Jews have horns? And you will contaminate the other members of this class. So would you please move to the back of the classroom and sit there for the rest of the class, the rest of the session and semester." She never called on me. I was the outliner, and it left an indelible impression about subtle forms and overt forms of discrimination. Yeah, people are stereotypes, races, religions. Everybody, I think, has some story to share, but that I just want to share it with the group. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, for sharing. That's unfortunate. Next.
I also experienced, hi, my name is Risky, and
Hi,
I also, I'm a Black woman and also a Muslim girl, and I was in high school once, and my teacher wasn't there, so we had a substitute, and I had my lunchbox with me, and I was going into the classroom, and this substitute, he comes to me and said, "Are you carrying a bomb?" I was so shook and surprised because he was a Black man. And to receive like that kind of negative thought towards me, like a Black woman, I was so shook. And then I was like, okay, why is he asking me this kind of question? And I'm like, I'm so young. Why are you like talking to me like that? And I was just quiet. I did not respond or anything. And I just went and sat next to my friend. And I was like, what was he talking about? Because that was like my first time experiencing this. And I never knew anything about like this difference or like racism. And I was like, oh my God, what did just happen? And then she was like, okay, do you want to report it? I was like, no, because I didn't know how to feel about it. And now still, like, I've graduated high school like 2 years ago, and it was like in 10th grade. So now I keep thinking, I'm like, that thing doesn't move out of my mind. It's so like.
Well, thank you, Risky, for sharing. I appreciate your courage to share here, and hopefully you do move to a position of healing. I know it is something that it just kind of never leaves you, right? You think about that all the time. You think about how people are perceiving you, and even if you do your part and do all of the right things to create a brand around who you are, there's always that misconception, that potential for bias, right? So thank you so much again for sharing.
I have one.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Ginas. I also go by Noor, and I graduated from Woodbury last year. And originally, I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, but my family were from Bangladesh. Initially, living there, we knew that as Bengalis, we were in the bottom of the food chain, right? And so that was something very normalized. Until I went for my first study abroad experience. I spent a year in Malaysia, and it's only after going there that I really understood the whole concept of racism. So I go to this Southeast Asian country, and I expect this to be a friendly place. You know, we look alike. Everything's going to be not so bad. Except I go there, and turns out that Malaysians have 3 races. They have Malays who are in the top, and then there's the Chinese, and then in the bottom are the Indians. So at this point, I'm attending a private institution, and I'm an international student, and it's a very expensive place. You don't get to just go to these institutions. And unfortunately, even though I'm not from India, I'm from Bangladesh. We look alike. It's to have these professors and everybody teach in Chinese and in Malay and sort of skip the whole language, sort of make it equitable for everybody else, and like not being served at restaurants every now and then, like being told to go back to where you came from. All of that was a very big shock for me. I was barely 19 when I did that, and it was crazy. And that was before America. And coming over here, everything is so political. The whole racism, the concept of racism is so difficult, and it was so hard to understand at first. I just thought, I don't know, I thought I'm just trying to say, it's only after coming to America that my mind sort of expanded, and seeing these things happen right in front of you on a much, much, much bigger scale, it's actually terrifying.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Thank you so much, Nora, for sharing. I know this is a very difficult topic, but I'll tell you, I'm very grateful for platforms like this for us to have very intimate discussion about what we've experienced. And I think while we don't always have the answer, the one thing that we can do is be empathetic to what people have experienced. That is, you don't have to have the solution, but I just need you to understand. I just need you to hear me and listen to some of my perspectives. And some of these, I think about Eric's response, Michelle's response, Risky's response. These are we move on to the next question, is that getting on a solution, the role that we can play during this time is to be very empathetic towards others. Okay, so thank you guys so much for that question. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. And that is, in what ways have you personally found social media helpful in sharing your own perspective about local and global issues?
Hi, my name is Ryda, and
Hi, Ryda.
I'm Palestinian, and so I think for me, social media allows me to read and share information about Palestine and Palestinians that I don't get in the mainstream media. And so usually we're villainized in mainstream media, but I'm able to share other types of information that wouldn't normally get any press.
Awesome. Thank you so much, right? I agree. It's definitely a platform that we've never had access to. That can serve us well if we use it properly, right? Anybody else want to share?
Crystal, I wanted to say, as far as sharing, I think I took, for the first time after the George Floyd murder, the opportunity to actually use the social media to voice, or to at least put up something like blackout on blackout days. I've never did that before because, for one, I never wanted to be seen as siding one way or the other. But I think one thing that's in this article, it talks about how the trauma from the experience that Black people, I can relate to, with George was for me to show how I was feeling, and I felt like I was mourning a loss, even though I don't know this man personally. It's happened to my husband, it's happened to me, it's happened to my daughter, it's happened to my son. And it makes me very emotional. And so for the first time, I took a stand that I haven't taken before by using the social media to voice how I felt.
Thank you, Lisa. This again, I'll keep saying it over and over. These as someone who does training programs for a living, I can't tell you how many requests for D&I training that I've received over the past couple of weeks. But what I can tell you is that training is only going to serve as a temporary Band-Aid until we start to have real transparent conversations like this. And the context for the articles that I shared, it was primarily focusing on African Americans, but clearly this is a global issue. It doesn't just rest with African Americans. It's a global issue. And again, it's part of that group where we're just waiting to see how this is going to play out, because we have some issues that we like to bring to the forefront as well. There's this population also, and I want to move on, but I do want to bring this up. There's also a population, and I've just had a conversation with my boss around this, around people who don't necessarily see it as a problem, or they fail to acknowledge it overall. And so they're using their platforms and their influence to just kind of keep the top on this issue, if you will, and stop conversations like this from continuing to happen. But what's going to be very important, I've talked to people who are now bringing in counselors into their work environment. They have focus groups like this. If someone gets agitated, or they're feeling a little overwhelmed or emotional about probably talking about something for the very first time, that's very, very personal and very, very intimate, you need resources like that. So we can talk about social media, we can talk about training, we can talk about all of those things and what we know to do, but I really believe in my heart that diversity and inclusion is a heart matter. I mean, you can train on, terminology, you can train on history, but it's really a heart matter. And until we start to deal with those matters of the heart, we're going to continue to see issues and challenges like this. I don't want to continue to talk, and I do want to open it up for someone else who'd like to share how they've used social media to share their perspectives.
For me, I use it now I feel free to use my social media to bring up injustice, or environments that are not positive for us. For example, there has been a lot of at-home abuses and violence because of the pandemic, because everybody is staying at home, and children being being abused by their parents, and those kind of things, nobody knows about them. And now from social media, we post the stories and try to find help for those who are quiet about these kind of things and bring awareness. And there are so many problems that people don't talk about, and now they feel free for us to share it with the public, or they can go to their friends, and their friends can spread the news about anything injustice that's happening. And that's, I think, the helpful side of the social media.
Awesome. Thank you, Risky. Anyone else want to weigh on? We don't have to use the entire time allotted here on this question. We can definitely move on and just have a little bit more time at the end for open discussion. But I do want to give everyone an opportunity to share if they like, as it relates to this question. Anyone else?
I was just going to add that there have been cases where I've posted links to fundraisers for different causes. And so I think social media is good for that.
Absolutely. I agree with that, Ryda. Gina or Norma?
Yes. So with social media, I realize as I'm on this path of activism and I'm teaching myself all of these things and sharing all this important information with everybody else, each time I post one of my own perspectives, I'll usually have one or two people respond to me saying how I am still not seeing the bigger picture. And I think just putting myself out there and all my perspectives for criticism has taught me a lot in this last 2 months than just the things that I see. I'm publicly being critiqued, and I think that's great. There's so much I've learned, and there's still so much left. And with each post, I have a following of, let's say, multiple countries, and we speak so many different languages. So each time I put something out there, I make sure it's understandable for everybody. So just the way the information is circulating, we're talking about racism here in America, but my stories are being shared across people in my own country, in Bangladesh, where we are very racist as well over there, and we don't acknowledge it. We stay away from these conversations. Mm-hmm. So social media has really turned around in the last couple of months.
You brought up a really good point, and I wanted to kind of unpack it a little bit in the last 2 minutes that we have for this session, about how whatever you post is open to public critique. And I think that's a really good point. And I think we're all pretty much aware of just the level of emotional intelligence that you post, even when you're trying to preserve your brand on social media anyway. But especially when you start to post your perspectives about very controversial perspectives, I think there is that added level of responsibility that we need to be mindful of, and that we do have to open ourselves up to constructive feedback and know that not everyone's feedback is going to be positive. Sometimes you may become a target, right? But the most important thing is that, and you said it very well, is to be mindful of how I post, what I post, and keeping an open mind for any feedback that I may have. I've certainly been educated on quite a few things over these last few weeks, specifically of things that I've posted and that I've shared that turns out to be very incorrect, or it's old information that's just now starting to circulate now because of everything that's going on now. And I've taken the ownership to remove it. It's not accurate. I certainly don't want to be posting inaccurate information, but that was a very good point. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
Crystal, I see it. There's 50 seconds left. Can I jump in quickly?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, you know what I found really, really sad is that social media is often not optimized for social justice messages. So there's a lot of resharing and sort of boosting that happens to posts about makeup or posts about food or posts about, selfies. So I will share with all of you guys, I was digging for it in my archives, but I'll share something that I posted in December 2017. And it's very timely now, so I think you'll appreciate it. Let's see. Oh, I cannot share because you're sharing. So maybe you let me to share this thing later. Because I don't want to, yeah.
Can you post the link in the chat and we can take it from there?
Well, it's not a link, it's not online. So anyway, we'll figure it out. But all I wanted to say was that it was a post that had to do with social justice, and it got very few likes. And then if I post myself a selfie of me on a bridge in London with my newest clothing, then I get 150 likes instead of the 36 that I got on this social. But I think you'll appreciate the picture because it's very timely for the moment we live in, but it's from 3 years ago. Anyway,
if you can share that with Lisa or Rachel, I do want to make sure that we get a chance to see that image.
Yeah.
I do want to move in for the sake of time. I'm going to move to the last question. And that question is, do you believe social media is a help or hindrance to decreasing racial injustice? And explain your perspective.
I can say something about this. So right now in Ethiopia, there has been a lot of problems between like ethnic groups. And we have like in Ethiopia more than 83 tribes. And between those tribes, there is like the biggest ones, and they're creating problems. And through social media, people living in the US, the diaspora, they take sides. And when they're taking sides, they promote violence. And through social media, people in Ethiopia can see those violence comments, which enrages more people over there and creates violence over there. So because of that, in Ethiopia right now, the government shut off all internet access because of social media and how it's promoting violence in the country. So sometimes I believe that social media can be like really negative on how people use it, and it can promote violence. And also like at the same time, it could be good for like social media when you're sharing it in the US, because you don't really create that much difference. But like in countries like where there is no government control, like policing and stuff a lot, people can get really violent with it. So social media is like, it depends on where you are and also like the people, if they follow their rules or anything. Here, if you're gonna say, I'm gonna hit someone or something, you're gonna be arrested. Over there, there's not any rules, so social media can be a tool to create.
We didn't get the last part of what you were saying, Risky. I think your phone, you're muted. You said social media could be a tool for?
to create a violence between like people, but at the same time it can be a positive thing if we're in like Western countries. So it depends. It has like its negative and positive aspects.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add there? I want to bring something up, but I want to make sure that I give everybody an opportunity. Ryda?
I'm so thankful for social media because, you know, I think these idiots who say there isn't racism or whatever, or who don't believe their friends or people that they know of color when they talk about violence towards them by the police, the fact that we can see images and videos now, we can't turn away. And I'm sorry that people have to see it. People have to see someone die and saying that he can't breathe to believe it. But I think there's a famous quote by Will Smith that says, you know, there's no difference now and in the past as far as like violence towards Black people, except that it's being videotaped. Mm-hmm. And so as a platform to show those videos, I'm thankful for it.
I agree.
And even with seeing it with our own eyes, we still get gaslighted, right? Because like when the police pushed down that elderly white gentleman and then said that he tripped when clearly he was pushed.
Right.
So, you know, I guess people need to use their critical thinking skills and believe what they see. But yeah, again, I'm thankful for it.
Thank you.
I was going to add, I believe social media can help, and like the other two said, it can also be a hindrance, but I think it's a bigger help for the same reason Ryda just said. You know, people are being able to see the things that some of us only experience in our personal lives. And it's also a help in the sense of, I know like for me as an employer and as a youth offender advocate, you get to see people's interpersonal thoughts. And a lot of people that you plan to hire or looking to hire, you can see the way they truly feel based on things that they're posting on their social media. For instance, we were having a big thing with DCFS on possibly getting the police on board to go out and do child welfare checks in this time of crisis, the pandemic. And I was on an advocacy group saying, we don't want to do that. We don't want to get the police involved. Let's leave it up to DCFS and to social workers, because for one, in the Black community, there's a big fear of the police. And they may be going out there for one thing and it turns out to be something completely different. So to hear that part, and then we had this big thing on social media where so many people express themselves, and to hear some of the things that they were saying clearly said, you know, they are home and they were not people of color, and they didn't get it. It just totally flew right check the other day, and the police turned it into a criminal investigation. So to see these things, it's like you get to see, like I said, the inner personal feelings of a person when you see on social media, opposed to when they interview in front of you one-to-one.
Very true. Thank you, Michelle. Nicole? Have you unmute your phone? We can't hear you. I see it's unmuted on your end, but we still can't hear you. At least I can't.
While she's in her microphone, I also want to say that I'm glad all these people are getting fired for the videos. So like what Michelle was saying, there was that guy who was tearing down Black Lives Matters posters, and he was a judge in family court. Just think of all the damage that he did to families. And so I'm thankful for the videos, because all of those people should get fired. The people who are coughing on people without masks, the racists, the whatevers. And now I'll let Nicole talk.
We still can't hear you, Nicole. No, looks like your mute button is on now. Can't hear you. Just, if you can fix your volume, just jump in. I just want to share one final thought as we wrap up this discussion. So I just found out I have 19-year-old, 15-year-old, 23-year-old, and a 4-year-old. You guys, please pray for me. But one thing that I just found out on social media is this whole cancel culture. So I had no idea such a thing even existed. And I've been listening to a lot of the controversy around it, while a lot of these advocates for social media and protest and justice are forming on social media and using their platforms to be able to speak up against injustice. There's also the danger, if you will, and